Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Kitchen Table Conversations, where we invite you to pull up a seat to the table talking about the hard things around food insecurity and then how we can be part of the solution. Today, I have a special guest with me, Jason Martin. But first, I'm going to let him introduce himself. Would you tell us a little bit about you and some of your background?
Absolutely. Jason Martin, the director of the Hunger Coalition in Northeast Mississippi, and also direct the St. Luke Food Pantry here in the Tupelo Lee County area. And been in this world now for quite some time. This is going on 13 years for me working in the food insecurity world, and probably about six of those as the director of the Hunger Coalition. You know, kind of seen a lot of the different aspects of food insecurity and hunger and what it looks like in our communities. But just like excited also just to share some of that information and hopefully, find a new listener, somebody that hasn't heard the stories and kind of, gain some traction on advocacy in our world.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you because throughout the past year as Miss Tupelo, I've gotten to talk a lot about St. Luke's and share resources with people who might be in need in the area. But I really think it's amazing how you work as part of this larger network and you focus on partnerships. Could you tell us, and for people who maybe aren't from the area, about the Hunger Coalition of Northeast Mississippi?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Hunger Coalition started kind of as a project between the Create Foundation, which is our local community foundation, and our local United Way, really to address food insecurity and hunger in a deeper way, to really hone in on what some of the challenges are and how, as a community, we can work to improve those circumstances. And also find some solutions that might be a little bit more repeatable, but also might have the opportunity in those solution finding to really begin to solve some of the problems that we're dealing with as we work through, the challenges of food insecurity. So that's kind of, if you will, that's kind of in the nutshell how we got started. And now we're at the place that the Hunger Coalition is preparing to spin off into its standalone organization as a nonprofit. And it's been a journey, but lots of fun.
That's so exciting, especially, we talk a lot about the importance of community. And when there are a lot of stakeholders involved, you really want to make sure that you're reaching out to different groups. And I think the Hunger Coalition and just that idea does such a great job of accomplishing that mission, as well as creating sustainable solutions. Short-term donations are always great, but you run into so many larger systemic issues along the way that y'all are addressing, which has been so encouraging to see this past year, learning more about the organization. You mentioned some of the challenges that people face related to food insecurity, and it looks different in every community. But as far as your perspective, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges that families, children, or seniors face when it comes to accessing consistent and nutritious meals?
Yeah, the across the board, there are a set of challenges that I think we see that are consistent across the world. And I'm sorry about my light, just kind of went crazy there. But there one of the things that we see probably most prevalent in that is that we have a transportation issue. And what I mean by that specifically is there's this challenge of having enough access to transportation that is reliable and is affordable to get to the services. And so we often hear or receive a phone call of people that just need food. They don't have gas money, they don't have a friend or a coworker or a neighbor or somebody that can help them get to that food. And most of the services are almost exclusively, none of the services really have, when I say services, I mean the food pantry services. None of those really offer, transportation to the home. And so that's one of the things that we've been looking at is how do we address that in a sustainable way that is, affordable, but how do we also, look at the challenge at the deeper level to begin to understand how did we get here? And so as we look at those situations and circumstances, we there's really a whole lot of things that apply to that. But transportation for certain is one of those things, and we also that comes in the realm too for families and children and seniors, especially those that are homebound and are trying to remain independent as long as possible. And so, just on our Meals on Wheels program here in the Tupelo Lee County area, we have something like 135 people that are receiving, that daily meal 5 days a week. But that's not enough. Unfortunately, we have a somewhat significant waiting list, and probably if the service was even doubled, I don't know that we could meet all of the needs when it comes to that. So. Children, the hardest story that we hear, I'll just speak to that for just a minute, but the hardest story we hear when it comes to children is when they tell us that over the weekend they didn't get to eat every day. And you ask the question, we asked the question to the children. It's like, well, why didn't you get to eat? And sometimes they've told us it's not their turn. When in a household with multiple children, and the parents just trying to make ends meet, they literally take turns eating, and it's that's the thing that keeps you up at night. How do we live in this world right here in the United States where we have an abundance of everything, and yet we have children who don't have enough to eat over the weekends when they're away from school and are having to take turns eating? That's the stuff that keeps you up at night and trying to figure out a solution.
Absolutely. There's so many confounding variables, which I think is something that people don't understand about food insecurity at first glance, is because you look at it as a lack of access to food, but sometimes it's the lack of all of these other things that allow you to have a healthy relationship and access with food. Especially in Mississippi, I'm glad that you mentioned transportation. In the first episode that we did of this, we had someone from a public health background who talked about rurality in Mississippi, and specifically in those more rural communities in the Delta, the lack of access to transportation to services and then grocery stores as well, creating even more difficulties and barriers for families to access food. But I think it's so impressive the way that you all meet people where they are. And I know that you don't necessarily do that alone. So I'm curious what role partnerships with local organizations, schools, churches, or even volunteers play in helping your pantry serve the community effectively.
Absolutely. So, from the broader perspective of the Hunger Coalition, we serve an 8 county, we and have an 8 county community service area that we work in. Inside of that, we have 18 food pantries that partner together with us in serving about 7,500 households every month. And then among our weekend programs for children, we have 20. I think it's now 28. That program has been growing exponentially, but we have about 28 program providers that are serving 3,500 children every week with a weekend bag of food, which is just amazing considering, where we came from just a few years ago, how that number is more than tripled from where we started. And so we're really excited about that. But when we look at those programs and providers, oftentimes those programs are operated out of churches and faith-based groups, but sometimes it's civic groups. It's it might be just any local club that people are involved with in a civic environment. And it really takes not just one area or one arena of groups of people to make that happen, but it takes a lot of people to make that happen because the needs are broad. They're really kind of daunting if you begin to look at it. And so, this really partnership group approach is how we've managed to obtain the success that we've had. And it's not due to just myself or any one or two persons, but this tremendous collaborative that we have. And I'm so sorry about that.
That's
We have
okay.
this tremendous collaborative that we have of people that are really working hard to um, address the issues in their own communities and make a difference around that. And so, it's you ask about who are some of the program or who are some of the partners, and we have local companies, larger size corporations, and I don't even want to get into naming the names of those groups, but they bring volunteers to us regularly. They spend the day or a couple of hours with us doing volunteer with at some of the food pantry distributions, and they go away from that experience having really began to understand the needs in our community, but they also get to have a time away from work, but yet with their coworkers, doing good. And that really creates this incredible camaraderie that happens in the workplace. And they go away and they talk about that, and then they start asking, when can we go back? And that's the thing we love to hear because, everything we do is pretty well done by volunteers. And, those volunteers make the programs possible. There's every pantry that we know, has an incredible list of volunteers.
Mhm.
But the one thing that's common is there's always room for more, and we always need more.
Absolutely. I appreciate, like you said, I got a hint of in that message, the importance of teamwork and working together and being
Yep.
part of the community. I'd like to talk about you for a second and your background in leadership, how that works in the nonprofit space. So if you could share with us some of your challenges that you face in nonprofit leadership, and if you have any advice for others that are looking to lead in their communities.
Well, one thing is true in our area is that we have an abundance of resources when it comes to nonprofits, and that's not always the case. In some of our more rural communities, there are fewer, there are just not as many services, and so we're really fortunate to that with that area. And we also, because of that, we have a tremendous partnership and network of other nonprofits that are working together to solve specific issues. And so one of the most great, to me, one of the things that's been awesome is the network of people. And as you get to know people who are doing specific things and they get to know you, you start making really quality referrals. And we're cognizant of if a company calls and says, "Hey, I've got something to donate," whatever it is, the product is, even if you can't use it, we often will say, but I know somebody that does and can use that and needs that. That just happened today. I had somebody that called me up just before this and had a donation of a rather large piece of equipment that would be rather expensive for us to have to purchase. And it looks like that piece of material, a piece of equipment is going to get donated. And it's all because of another nonprofit in the town that said, "Hey, we don't really need that, but we know somebody that does," right? And so, just being out there in the community and being engaged. So, the time and energy that it takes to develop those quality relationships is worth, more than you could possibly imagine. You really can't get a foothold if you spend the majority of your time in the office. And we often like to we just want to hammer down, we just want to focus hard and get the work done. But a lot of the work is unseen by many people in the community. And so anytime there's a public event, whether it's a ribbon cutting or somebody's having an open house or whatever the case might be, it's important as a nonprofit director and leader to be out there in that and just to be engaged with the community because you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from. It might be that there becomes a donation from that. It might be that you generate volunteers from that. But a lot of the, I will say, a lot of the success that I've had has been because of my history and the things that I've been able to do in my work life. And when I graduated college, I went back to Tennessee and had a business with my dad. And so we worked together for many years. And in that, I got to wear a lot of different hats. I learned how to manage people. I learned how to deal with finances, and a lot of different things. And then when I moved to Mississippi, I was involved in leadership in the church for a long time. I had a 17-year career as a youth minister. And when you learn to deal with and work with youth and teenagers and families, you really gain a lot of skills in that process. And so, it's not that there's one particular thing that's led me to the place I'm at now, but it's a whole host of things that have led me to where I'm at to have the success that we have going and this incredible momentum that's really snowballed over the last couple of years.
I love that, especially the relational aspect of this kind of work when you're working to serve the community, being a part of that and getting to know people is so, so important. So thank you for that advice. I know I gained something from it. I kind of have two things here to close us out for the people listening who want to make a difference. What are the most meaningful ways that they can support your work, whether it's through volunteering, donations, or simply spreading awareness?
Well, you just named all the three most important things we can do to help us, and that is that we're always looking for volunteers. In the food pantry world specifically, though, we are looking for all types of people. But what we find most often is recent retirees who have a lot of things to give. They have a lot of energy to give and a lot of time, and they want to do something meaningful with the last third of their life. And so, somebody that's getting ready to retire or thinking about retirement or has a family member who's getting ready to do so, we would love to connect with them. And because we will help you find a place. And if it's not with our organization, we can make a referral to another organization where you might find a better fit. But within, when you begin to think about that, the other thing is listening to an opportunity that may arise. And it may be that you're standing around the water cooler at work and you hear that your company is getting ready to donate anything. It could be desks, it could be office chairs. It might be that you have a friend or somebody who is in the food production world. We always have a need for food, and there's a lot of different types of food that we can utilize. And even if we can't use it in one circumstance, we have the opportunity to do so in other circumstances. And so, there's just being aware of that. And then, lastly, I'll just say that if people will just take a few minutes in their day, and when they see something really special that a nonprofit, whether it's our organization or 10 other different organizations, but if you will help comment on that, if you'll share that, that little bit of momentum means a whole lot because that means that somebody else will eventually get to see that might not have seen that because it wasn't in their algorithm.
I feel really confidently that some of this hopefully will plant a seed for somebody listening and give them ideas for a new way to get engaged. The final question that I have for you is that as somebody who works directly with families in need in the Tupelo area, what gives you hope for the future of hunger relief and community support?
Well, we have seen community support really grow, and people that are beginning to invest in us, whether it's financially or with just their resources of their time. We've seen so much of that over the last handful of years as we really our name is beginning to be out there more and more into the community. And so when you have that blind phone call that somebody calls you and says, "Hey, Jason, been thinking about your organization and we want to make a donation or we want to come out and volunteer." And that was unplanned, we didn't have that. We didn't know that was coming. It was not on our radar. But somewhere along the way, either I did or somebody else planted a seed, and that seed got a little bit of nurturing along the way until somebody said, "Hey, we can do something there to make a difference." And part of what we talk about oftentimes is we want the community to come together because together we can make a difference in the lives of our hungry citizens, particularly in the realm of children and senior adults and some of the most at-risk community. And so we just, if somebody has that minute to give one little like or one little share or make one comment on a social media post or answer that call to volunteer, those kinds of things really gain a lot of momentum and it means a lot to us in the nonprofit world.
Mhm. Well, we are going to link all of the social media information and then some ways that you can get plugged in below so that you can continue to plant those seeds like we talked about and share this with all of the people that you know. I want to thank you, Jason, for agreeing to do this, answering my blind call to share information with people across Mississippi about food insecurity in Tupelo and how to be part of the solution. Thank you for listening to Kitchen Table Conversations, and we'll be back with another episode next week.